All right. Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to the C Show. I'm Chris, and your host. I got my buddy here, Scott Mosley from Canada. Who
What's
is a
up? Thanks for having
What's
me.
up, Scott? How are
Thanks
you,
for.
man?
I'm good, bro. I'm good.
Met Scott on some JFK forums and got to meet him last year in Dallas too. He's a pretty cool dude. Um,
Thanks.
yeah. So what you been doing the last year, man?
Not much, bro. Just socially isolating and not getting COVID. That's about it.
Yeah.
Or possibly getting COVID. I don't know, really, to be honest. Maybe I
Yeah.
had COVID. Maybe I didn't. Not really sure. But I'm all right now. Either way.
Yeah. Yeah, I am too. Of course, I've got a place to go anywhere. So I guess I'm all right too. So Scott, man, tell me, what makes a 30-something-year-old guy from Canada be so interested in the Titanic?
Well, I've always been interested in the Titanic. It's been an interest I've had for most of my life, ever since I was a young boy. Like, I think it's a testament to the place that the story of the sinking of the Titanic has in our culture, that even as a small child, I knew about the Titanic. Like, I knew it was this ship that sank. And then one day I saw an episode of the TV show Reading Rainbow. If you're familiar with that, it was on PBS.
I don't think I've ever
And
seen.
it was a show about books hosted by LeVar Burton, the guy that played Geordie LaForge on Star Trek: The Next Generation.
Yeah.
So as a kid, I was watching an episode of that show, and they had a book about the sinking of the Titanic, and the kid on the show read the book, and it told the story. And it was there that I learned all this stuff. Like, I knew the Titanic was a ship that sank, but when I saw this episode, I learned that it was supposed to be unsinkable, and that it was its first trip, and there was all these super rich people, famous people on board. It's like the Titanic, somebody once described it as, imagine taking a plane and putting like the 100 most wealthiest, most famous people on that plane, and it crashes and most of them die. That's kind of
Huh.
like what it would be like today.
Why? Why was it supposed to be unsinkable?
Well, they designed the ship to have these watertight bulkheads that could be closed. So when they were designing the ship, their idea was like to contain the damage, right? So most collisions will occur at the front of the ship where the ship runs into something. So any like three out of the first five compartments can be flooded. The first four compartments can be flooded, and any three compartments in the ship can be flooded as long as they're not all adjoining. So they
Okay.
figured, there was no scenario in which more compartments like that would take damage and be flooding. Therefore, you could close the watertight bulkhead, and it would stop the water moving horizontally through the ship, and you would be fine. They never imagined the scenario that actually occurred, where five of the compartments, possibly six, took damage, and like they're all flooding, and closing the watertight bulkheads doesn't matter because it's too many compartments.
So that scene in the movie where that guy's explaining it's gonna, so that's pretty accurate the way he explains that it's gonna spill over this one and this one and this one, and the guy says this ship can't sink and said something like she's made of iron, sir. She can.
Yeah, yeah, it absolutely can sink. It absolutely can. It's a ship. Any ship can sink if it takes enough damage.
Because I always
So,
go ahead.
sorry, go ahead, go ahead.
No, I just wondered how the way, and pretty much the way you just explained it was how he explained it. So I wondered how accurate that was from the movie. So basically, if they would have just hit that iceberg head on, it wouldn't have really damaged the ship at all. Then,
Uh,
right? I mean, they're not
Possibly.
gonna.
There's no real way to know that. Like,
Yeah.
people have proposed that over the years, and it might be true, but you know, the maneuver is to avoid hitting the object, right? The
Right.
maneuver is to hit the object directly and just take it head on, you know? So
Yeah.
nobody would try that in real life. They would always try to avoid hitting it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess that's they'd be trained to do that. The captain, that was his last voyage too, right?
We don't really know that for sure. We think he probably would have stayed on to do the initial voyage of the third Olympic class ship, which was originally going to be called Gigantic. But after what happened to the Titanic, they were like, okay, no more names like that. So they renamed it to the more patriotic sounding Britannic. But that ship never saw passenger or cargo service. Upon its completion, it was immediately pressed into service as a Royal Navy hospital ship, and it was lost shortly thereafter when it hit a mine and sank. So if none of that stuff had happened, Edward Smith probably would have stayed on for the maiden voyage of the third Olympic class ship and then might have retired, you know?
Okay. Um, the when they had, of course, that's my favorite part. That's the part I watch of the movies when it starts sinking.
Oh, yeah.
when, yeah, I mean
Hey,
the other.
fun fact, Chris, I have seen the movie Titanic in theaters 23 times, including the time I saw it in theaters in the year 2012 when they re released it in 3D.
You
I
seen
went
it?
back to see it in the theaters in the year 2012 because it was back in theaters in 3D. I was like, fuck yes, I haven't been to a movie theater in years. Let's go.
You've seen it 20. I mean, from beginning in the theaters 23 times.
In theaters, bro, you've seen my tattoo, right?
I
Like I've
mean,
been obsessed with the Titanic since the
but
time I was a little kid, and then Hollywood shows up and they make this awesome Titanic movie. Hell's yeah, I'm gonna go see that
but
shit.
okay, I agree with you up until like I will I will watch it every time it comes on from the moment it hits the iceberg.
Uh
I can't sit there and watch the whole.
you're missing
Yeah.
out, man. You're missing on
Huh?
like prime Titanic footage right there, you know?
But I
Titanic
don't.
along during the day, Titanic at sunset.
I can do away with the whole, the love story part. I mean, I want the, give me straight to the action when the ship starts sinking. I mean, that's when that's when it gets good. Is when that's, like I had enough of Leonardo DiCaprio. Okay, so the boats, the lifeboats, was they really not filling them up to capacity?
No, they were not initially. Like you see, the thing is, we can talk about the movie because the movie has like a great place in Titanic culture, right? The world
Yeah.
of Titanic people. It's like a revival moment, you know,
Uh-huh.
where suddenly the Titanic comes back into popular fashion again. And but there's a lot of scenes in that movie where it's not altogether historically accurate. Like we don't
Oh
really
yeah.
know if the crew was ever explicitly told, "Hey, this fucking thing is sinking. Make sure you get people out of here," you know? So initially,
Yeah.
it was hard to load the lifeboats because a lot of people just didn't want to get into them, you know? And it's like you have to understand you're looking over the side of the ship at night on the open sea. It's like a 7-story building you're looking down the side of, and you don't want to get into this boat and get lowered over the side with ropes
Yeah.
while the
I can see where
is sinking. Like you look over the side, you can't even see the water. It's just darkness, you know?
dark and
And
cold and not telling you to get in the, yeah, okay.
yeah, and people didn't initially want to go. And also there was misunderstandings of the orders given. On the starboard side, the lifeboats are being loaded by the first officer, and on his side, he interpreted the order as women and children first. So he loads the women and children into the lifeboats, and then he looks around and doesn't see any more women and children. And he's like, okay, anybody else want to get in these lifeboats? And he puts in men and loads them fuller and launches them. On the port side, I believe the lifeboats were being loaded by the third officer, and he interpreted the order as women and children only. So he would load a
Oh
boat
God.
with women and children and look around, okay, no more women and children, lower this boat. But you, there's also the idea that like the boats could return to the ship, like they
Okay.
could return to the ship if flooding could be controlled. They could return to the ship if additional people needed to be loaded on them from doors that are like closer to the water line. Once you
Yeah.
have the boat in the water, you can do various things with it. So it's like you can transfer passengers from one boat into another and bring the empty boat back to the ship to take another whole boatload.
Uh,
So it's not necessarily that they were purposely like, okay, let's just not fill these boats. There was a
okay.
lot of confusion that went on that night. Basically, the
Okay.
command structure of the ship pretty much fell apart. Captain Smith, the story of the Titanic, it is a great story of irony, a great story of hubris and folly, and how pride goes before the fall. Prior
Yeah.
to setting out on the maiden voyage of Titanic, Captain Smith gave an interview to a shipping journal, and in it, uh, he said, when anybody asks me to describe my almost 50, 60 years at sea, I simply say uneventful. I mean, there's been bad weather, but we've had our difficulties here and there, but I've never been wrecked. I've never seen a wreck. I've never seriously worried about the possibility of a wreck. Modern shipbuilding has gone beyond that. And it's
Mm,
it's ironic because you're the captain of the Titanic, arguably the most famous shipwreck of all time, right? But
yeah.
it's when it all went wrong, that guy who had 50, 60 years at sea wasn't very good. He had never dealt with a problem like this in all his years.
Uh,
He didn't know how to respond. He didn't know what to do. So he kind of just shut down, and the officers underneath him had to make suggestions. Do you think we should send a distress call? Yeah, that's a good idea. Send a distress call. Do you think we should lower the lifeboats? I guess, yeah, that's a good idea. Lower the lifeboats. He wasn't taking charge and snapping people to command like he should have been.
huh. I wasn't aware of that. They just, uh, I didn't. Yeah, I didn't know that about him. I've never heard the story that sounds like he just totally froze up in the moment. But I mean, I guess when you've never been in that situation,
It
still
was
though.
ironic because he really looked the part. He was like this old grizzled sailor with his old sailor white beard, and he looked very much like what you think a guy who has spent his entire life at sea would look like. But he just got lucky. His 50 years at sea were uneventful, but that in a way is bad because when something happened, he just froze up.
Yeah, I mean, I can now see that the way you've explained it unfold. 50 years not going through anything, ship's unsinkable, just panics.
And then
I
you're
mean,
like, oh
but
shit, it's sinking. Uh-oh.
but is there anything that he could have done any differently at that point though that would have made that big of a difference?
Not really. Like there isn't anything. They could have made sure the lifeboats were more full. They could have launched the lifeboat sooner. They could have sent a distress call sooner. But other than that, not really. Like one interesting theory that I think actually kind of holds some weight is this idea of instead of giving the life belts to the passengers, because they're made out of cork, collect all of the life belts, go to the forward part of the ship that's about to be flooded, find a small area, and pack all of the life belts into that area so that when this part of the ship floods, there's less volume there. And the cork all packed in the one area will kind of act like a buoyant force, just kind of
Huh.
like slightly pulling the front end of the ship up, just like a tiny, tiny little bit. Because if you can retard the flooding process even like slightly like that, you can buy dramatically more time. Because like
Ah.
you have to understand, like the naval engineers who built this thing, they never imagined a scenario where it would sink at all, let alone one where it would sink before help had plenty of time to arrive. Like they never imagined a scenario where the thing sinks in like 3 hours, you know? So if you can just slow that flooding process down, like in the initial period for a little bit, you can maybe stretch that 3 hours into like 12 hours, 15 hours at a
Oh,
high end.
really?
Yeah,
That's a. I
possibly
mean,
longer, possibly longer. I've seen some estimates that suggest like if they had done that, they could have potentially saved the ship because they could have gotten other ships to her and they could have helped, pump out water or possibly even send a dive team down or something.
how long did
Like
it take the ship to sink?
like a little under 3 hours.
Huh? No, I've never heard that theory before. That's wow, 15 hours. How far away was the nearest ship again when they sent out the stress call?
Well, there's a lot of controversy about that because we believe that there was actually a ship within visual range. But
Oh, really?
yeah, out of all the
Visual
one
range?
visual range, but dude, on the open sea, visual range can be like very far away. One of the
Okay.
officers on
Okay.
Titanic tried to signal this ship with the Morris lamp, and one of the officers on the other ship also tried to signal Titanic with the Morris lamp, but neither one of them got the other one's message because there was this weird visual phenomenon going around, kind of like a shimmer on the horizon.
Yeah.
That effect can also happen on the open sea. So when these two officers are looking through the spyglass to try to see the Morris lamp signal from the other ship, they don't see the strict like dots and dashes of Morse code. They see this wavy, hazy kind of light because it's coming through that shimmer on the horizon. So even though Titanic was trying to signal that ship and that ship was trying to signal Titanic, neither one of them got the message.
Okay. Because I mean, yeah, I didn't think about that at first when you said visual range. I'm thinking, man, visual range, and then I'm thinking, wait, on the open sea, that could be a
Yeah,
long
that's
way off.
very far away, but it's still within visual range, right? Like it's
Right.
still
Yeah.
within the range for Morris lamp signaling.
Um. So you mentioned a while ago about the wealthy that was on the ship. You know, the powerful. So, but there was a lot of poor too, right?
Oh yeah, these ships pretty much made their money on bulk transport, whether it was people or cargo. That's really where the revenue from the ship came from. It was kind of, people were immigrating to North America in the early part of the 20th century, and this was how they had to do it because there was no other way to cross the ocean other than a passenger ship like this. So, those people represented like most of the revenue of the ship. And then you would have the second class, which was like the bourgeois middle class, people who were maybe making like a once in a lifetime trip or something, or maybe a more wealthy couple, wealthier middle class couple on their honeymoon or something like that. And the revenue from the second class would, cover the rest of the operating cost of the ship and generate a little bit of profit. And then you had the first class, and that was just like total cream, total profit. and the amount of money those people paid for their tickets were just like crazy and absurd. The the cabin that Rose and her fiance are staying in on Titanic, in the movie Titanic, there were two cabins like that on Titanic that had a little private promenade deck, and one was unoccupied. That's the one this fictional character stays in her trip on Titanic. The
Oh,
other one
really?
was, yeah, the other one was occupied by J. Bruce Ismey. He was the ostensibly the owner of the ship, the owner of the White Star Line, and
Okay.
like, adjusted for inflation, a one-way trip in that cabin was like $300,000 US dollars in today's money. It was just like crazy expensive to
A
do shit.
one-way trip
It was
was
like
300.
300K, yeah, adjusted for inflation, roughly. That's just
Roughly.
like a
God.
rough estimate, yeah.
Ah. Well, you said the guy who was on is a. Well, I'm sure it didn't go down this way, but did he make it off the ship?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I figured he would have.
Yeah, he was vilified for that. Like, when you're a member of the wealthy class like that and you run in those social circles, it's like your reputation is your life and death. So because the owner of the ship survives to explain how so many women and children entrusted to the care of his company did not survive, it's very bad. But that being said, you know, Bruce Ismay, honest to God, might have been one of the last people to get into a lifeboat on Titanic. Like, he didn't leave in the first lifeboat or the second, third, or fourth one. He left in the last lifeboat that was launched successfully from the ship. So he might have been one of the last, if not the last person to leave that sinking ship. And
In all
you
honesty, I can't really blame him.
no, no, honestly, I can't either. It's like I can't blame somebody for saving their own life,
No,
even
man.
though it ruined him. It totally ruined him.
Yeah, I mean, I can't really say that. It's when it comes down to self-preservation. I can't say I would. I would have done the same thing. I can't really fault the guy for that.
I think I might have too.
I mean,
When
it's
when the
when
ship carrying Titanic survivors was getting close to New York, it got into radio range of American Coast Guard and Navy vessels. And already the wheels of the American government were turning, and they were getting ready to have an inquiry into the sinking of the Titanic. So I can't remember if it was the U.S. I believe it was the U.S. Coast Guard, but they reported to Washington that they were receiving transmissions from this ship, and it was instructions to White Star Line to hold ships ready to send crew members back to England the second they get to New York. And they were assigned Yamsey. And very quickly they figured out that Yamsey is Ismay spelled backwards. So they're like, okay, this is the owner of the ship telling his company to hold the ships they have in New York City, because the second this ship hits the docks, he wants to take all of Titanic's surviving crew members, him too, get on these ships and book it back to England to be out of the reach of American justice. So they, they get ready, and the senator, a guy named William Alden Smith, a Republican from Michigan, he is got the subpoena and he's ready. The second Carpathia, the ship carrying Titanic survivors, hits the dock in New York, this guy is like running up the gangplank with the feds. He's got his subpoena and he's looking for Ismay. And they tell him, oh, he's in the doctor's quarters, and the senator goes in to serve him with the subpoena. And the second he opened the door and got inside, instantly his mood changed, and he felt like a great deal of pity for this guy he had come to serve with a subpoena, because he was just like a totally broken man. There was like a pile of vomit in the garbage can. The guy was totally disheveled. You could see that, like, he had suffered a great trauma, and it was then that like the tone kind of changed. It kind of
Huh.
became like, oh, you know what, maybe this guy is a lot more messed up than we initially thought. At least that's my interpretation of it. He still got served the subpoena and he still had to testify in America, but he claimed that, hey, I just wanted to get these surviving crew members back to their families as quick as possible. We never had any intention of not answering for what happened or being accountable, et cetera, et cetera. So J. Bruce Ismey, he's a very divisive character. He's often seen as one of, if not the villain of the story of the Titanic.
It seems kind of unfair in a way. I mean,
His
I
father built that shipping line up and he took it over, and when it was under him he sold it to IMM, International Mercantile Marine, which was this huge shipping conglomerate run by JP Morgan.
huh.
And after it sank and he survived, the board of directors pretty much told him, like, you're done. You're poisoned for this company. You need to go away and never ever ever associate yourself with like White Star Line or anything like that ever again, because you're poisoned by your garbage. And it's like that had been his father's company. So the Titanic totally ruined that guy's life. For the rest of it, he started a charity for like widows and orphans of sailors, but for the rest of his life, he he would never let anybody even mention the Titanic in his presence.
That that's an interesting story. I mean, I've never heard that whole tale about him. Huh. So, you said he testified for. Did anything ever happen to him for? Was he punished
No,
anyway for?
no, he wasn't punished for anyway. Like obviously there was politics at play aboard Titanic because it wasn't just like a regular normal voyage. Like technically speaking, J. Bruce Ismay is just another passenger. He is not in the ship's chain of command, and
Oh yeah.
he can't tell anybody to do anything, and he's not responsible for anybody's doing anything. But he's the owner of the company. He's
Right.
traveling in a suite that costs $300,000 for a one-way ticket. You know, could he exert influence over the ship's crew? Yeah, absolutely he
Yeah.
could.
Yeah, I would
There
think so.
there's a scene where it's where he like implies that the ship should go faster to make headlines for getting into New York early.
Yeah.
And that comes to us from one of the survivors who was eavesdropping, and she overheard this conversation in the Cafe Parisienne on Titanic. So, I mean, did that actually happen? Did it not happen? Did he encourage it? What? But I mean, also you have to look at it in the context of the owner of the ship. Like Titanic and her sister Olympic had been very expensive to build. The third one is under construction right now. Like they have to jazz it up a bit. They need these ships to make money.
Yeah, I see
So
what you're saying.
speeding up and arriving in New York early, you can be like, oh, look at how awesome this ship is. It's super fast and luxurious.
Yeah, because I mean, the guy's not going to sit there thinking we're going to hit an iceberg out here in the middle of the
Oh,
ocean and tear the ship up and kill how many people died on it. Yeah, so I mean, I can totally see that. Um, I mean, it seems like everything just lined against him. Um, I guess it goes that way sometimes. How many people died on
a
the?
little over 1,500, I believe, like almost 1,600, I believe. I used to know things like that when I was younger. I used to know like the exact coordinates where Titanic reported her position. But as I grew older, I kind of just like to have an appreciation of the general history and the general story of it. So I believe the total death toll of Titanic was like around 1550.
You remember how many people was on the ship total?
Around 2200. We don't know exactly
Oh
because
wow!
I
So
mean, it's always a thing with like records from this era and also just the shipping industry in general. Like people jump on and off ships all the time, you know?
uh,
And people join under fake names. And a lot of the time, people will join a crew of a ship just to get a free ride to America. And then we get to New York, jump off the ship to say bye, you know?
yeah. Um, and so I was gonna tell you, and the thing about numbers and stuff, it gets worse. When I was in my 20s, I could look at a paragraph and one time and then recite it back to you. I
Yeah.
can't remember. I can't remember somebody's name now, so it'll
Yeah.
get worse.
I'm sure, bro. It's coming.
um, uh, Titanic, and then you mentioned the gigantic, but is that the one that was Britannica?
Yeah, it was Britannic.
Okay,
So the
yeah, I
first
was
ship,
wondering about that story.
the first ship is the Olympic, and
Okay,
the other ships are Olympic class ships. So
okay,
Titanic is a copy of Olympic. The Olympic class ships were named after the races that inhabited Mount Olympus in Greek mythology, the Olympians, the Titans, and the Giants. So it was going to be
okay.
Olympic, Titanic, and then the third one was originally going to be Gigantic. But after Titanic, they were like, yeah, we got to change that name. So they changed it to the more patriotic sounding Britannic. Also, the company that operates these ships, White Star Line, they have a tradition of naming their ships in a ick ending syllable, like
Mhm.
Nordic, Republic,
Okay.
Majestic, Gigantic. This is in contrast to their rival Cunard, who ends their ships with a la suffix at the end, like Mauritania, Lusitania, Carpathia.
Okay.
So yeah, it's a naming thing and a mythology thing.
I didn't know that at all. I did. That's pretty neat right there. Because
Yeah,
I never knew.
and
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
the that naming thing for White Star Line, it went all the way down through the fleet, like down to the tugboats that pulled Titanic out of the harbor. You know, they were
Oh,
Republic traffic. You know,
oh,
it's
wow. I mean, I'm just taking that in. Uh, no, I didn't know. I had no idea the namings of the ship went like that. That's kind of taken back with that because I've always heard. I remember them saying Britannica sunk too, but I never really knew how until you told me that. Would you say it was hit in a mine explosion?
yeah, it was running in the Aegean Sea. It had the watertight compartments open, and they hit a mine, like an underwater mine, and it started to flood. But because they were so close to land, the captain tried to just push the throttle all the way open and steer the ship onto land to beach it. But after going a short distance, it was sinking too fast, and they tried to launch the lifeboats, and the ones that actually got into the water got churned up by the propellers because the propellers were still moving because the ship was sinking so fast that even though they tried to stop the propeller, it was still spinning. And
Uh,
so if you went into the boats in the water, you got chopped up in the propellers, and the people that jumped off the boat and swam to shore, they were pretty much fine.
oh God,
Yeah.
yeah, that ugh, yeah.
Britannic is not in that deep of water. Like you can reach Britannic in like a scuba suit if you have enough training to go to like 200, 300 feet, you know?
Oh, so I didn't know it was that shallow where it went down.
Yeah.
What what year? Do you remember what year that was they found Titanic? I remember it being on
I
TV.
believe it was 1987 or 1988.
That's what I was gonna say was 87 because it seems like I just remember as a kid seeing that. Yeah, I thought it was around 87. because I forgot which. Oh God, which one of the shows it was on? But yeah, I remember that. What's the other question I had for you about that? Yeah. How cold was it that night?
I don't remember exactly, but it was a few degrees above freezing, I believe the air temperature was.
Uh-huh. So,
But it's like the water itself was very cold. So yeah, I mean it's the North Atlantic. So even though the air temperature wasn't really that bad, it was like a degree or two above freezing. The water temperature was like near freezing.
yeah, I can't. Yeah, I can't imagine. I know going down to the beach and it'd be 85 degrees outside, and you get in the water and you're chilled to the bone. So I can't
Yeah.
imagine what it would be like in that situation. That's got to be a rough way uh, to go. Probably really slow too. I would imagine in that water, freezing to death.
Yeah.
Um, let's see. So the temperature and ships and uh, oh yeah, there was a guy who I knew who worked at U.S. Steel. He told me that the steel that they used to make Titanic with would have just been scrapped today. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah. There's a lot of truth to that. At the turn of the century, like today, if we were going to make a ship, I mean, obviously today we make ships much greater than Titanic, but today if we were going to make a ship like that, we would look to acquire all the steel from one batch. Because today you can purchase steel in batches of like, 250,000 tons, 500,000 tons, and it all comes out of the same blast furnace. You know what I'm saying? Back
Yeah.
in those days, you couldn't acquire steel at that rate, meaning if you were doing a project like Titanic, you would have to acquire steel from various different manufacturers. So the metallurgical like consistency of it wouldn't be universal across the whole structure of the ship because it had been sourced from like different manufacturers in different furnaces. Also, there's the problem of assembling the ship because these are riveted hull plates. They have like a first generation hydraulic press. So for most of the ship, you can utilize this hydraulic press to like pop a rivet in the mouth, line the press up, fire it, and the press will drive the rivet through the rivet holes, sealing the two plates together. However, there's a problem because the press is so huge because it's a first generation like hydraulic press. It's a brand new thing. They have to it's like big and heavy, so they have to mount it on this system that can be moved to wherever it's needed. But the problem is it can't be moved to the very front and very back of the ships. So in these parts of the ship, the whole plates have to be fastened together manually. So this is a process called hot riveting, where you have like a fire going and you take the rivet you're going to use to join the two hull plates together and you heat it up in the fire until it's like red glowing hot, and then somebody grabs it and holds it in position and you like smack it in with a hammer, and as it cools it'll expand and seal the joints between those two plates. But the thing is, because you have to do this manually, you can't use steel rivets because steel is too strong for hot riveting. So instead, you have to use wrought iron rivets. So these are not
Oh,
as strong as steel. And this means that right at the front of the ship, those plates that have to be manually fastened together with wrought iron rivets are not as strong as the seals in other parts of the ship's hull. You know what I'm saying?
okay. Yeah, I'm following you. So
So
this.
the
Go ahead.
answer to that question is yes, the steel and the construction techniques were kind of inferior, but again, it was not something that was done on purpose. It was just the nature of the beast and how they had to build a ship like Titanic back in those days.
So if had the capabilities, or if they had all used it and built like today, there's a chance it wouldn't have sunk, or maybe would have lasted longer. Or...
Yeah, definitely. But I mean, if they built it the way they built it today, it wouldn't be Titanic, right?
Right. Yeah. True.
So they keep talking about, oh, some guy is gonna make a new Titanic. Bro, I've been hearing that shit for like 20 years. I'll fucking believe it when I see it.
Yeah. A new Titanic. Yeah.
But
Hmm.
you can't, because you can't build that ship again, because the technology for building ships today is very different from how it was a century ago, The
Yeah. I
only
can only.
place you're going to find a team of skilled riveters is in a fucking graveyard.
That's a that's a good way to put it.
And it's like modern environmental regulations will not allow you to operate a coal-fired ship. Modern regulations will not allow you to have that much wood in the interior of the ship. Modern regulations will not allow you to have corridors which are that narrow. There's no way you could build a replica of Titanic today and have it actually be like a legit one-to-one replica.
Right.
Like even the hull plates would have to be welded together, because that's how we assemble hull plates today. We don't rivet them. Nobody has riveted hull plates together in like almost 100 years.
All right. So, and I don't know what these numbers mean, but when they say something 4 knots or 6 knots, so how fast could that ship travel? I mean, like in miles per hour that I'll understand.
It was like estimated. We don't know what Titanic's top speed was, but we
Uh-huh.
estimate it's somewhere in the area of like 25 knots. And
Uh-huh.
25 knots is like roughly like 55, 60 miles per hour.
Okay. Okay.
Roughly.
That's moving pretty good.
Yeah, I mean it the thing about the design of Titanic was, so there were these two companies, okay? There was White Star Line, which was part of that larger conglomerate, International Mercantile Marine, and then there was Cunard Line, which was not. So Cunard Line had gone into a deal with the Royal Navy where they were like, "Hey, help us develop this prototype propulsion system that makes ships go faster." And we will give you 10 years exclusivity on the patent, and the Royal Navy will get access to the technology too. So Cunard got in on that deal with the English government, and so they developed this propulsion technology, and then they made the Mauretania and Lusitania sister ships using it, and they were super fast. There's a prize called the Blue Ribbon, and it's just a big giant blue ribbon, and it's a prize won for the fastest westbound crossing from Europe to North America. And Mauretania, that ship flew the Blue Ribbon for like 30 years. She was unrivaled, the fastest ship on the Atlantic. White
Wow.
Star Line and the company that was building their ship, Harland and Wolff, did not have access to that technology. So they knew that we could never make ships that are as fast as the Mauretania class ships. However, we can make ships that are, regular speed, but are super luxurious. So
Okay.
that's the road they went down, offering. Mauretania was like luxury and speed, and Titanic was like regular speed, super luxury.
That that's too cool. I mean, I had no idea that ship was moving that fast. Um,
Well, we estimate it could go that fast. Like, I'm
I mean,
not too sure about
even
knots. I
if
might
something like
be.
that was going 30 miles an hour, that's still. I mean, to me, that's still moving fast, and I don't understand ships like that. But something that big.
Well, like it's kinetic energy, right? They move
Yeah.
with momentum on the
Mhm.
water, right? So
Right.
once you get the momentum going, you can go pretty fast. Like, its estimated top speed is probably somewhere in the area of like 68, 69 miles per hour. Like it's pretty fast.
Wow.
Yeah. It can
So,
also go from full speed ahead to a dead stop in less than 3 times its own length, and it's 900 feet long. Like that's not bad, you know. Like
no, that's
Titanic,
not.
in her time, she was probably the safest ship in the world. She was probably her specs were good, you know. It's just shit happens, man. And
The stars.
ultimately, that's the moral of the story. It's that everything can be perfect and the unsinkable ship can sink because shit happens, bro.
Um, so any interesting trivia or anything I should know that I've probably never heard of?
Oh God, there's probably all kinds. There's a myth that somebody was sealed inside of the ship during construction.
Oh
There's a
wow.
there's a story that Titanic had this number assigned to it. It was like 43031. And when you viewed this number's reflection off the surface of the water, it read no pope, and it was interpreted as an anti-Catholic message. And you know, it's a manifestation of the Titanic being used as like a moralizing story.
Huh.
There's a song by Edward Lebeltier, Lead Belly, they called him, a famous blues musician. He sang a song called Fare Thee Titanic, Fare Thee Well. You know, there's all kinds of stuff, bro. There's all kinds of stuff. There was a
Uh,
mummy on board, allegedly.
a mummy?
A mummy, yeah. There was it was the mummy's curse that sank the Titanic.
Mummy's curse. I've never heard that one. Um, okay. Favorite part of the movie?
Oh God, it's got to be the collision, man. It's got to be the collision. Like they film so much stuff. Like they film scenes for that movie that take place on the ship that is within visual range. In the James Cameron like uncut version, you can see those scenes where it shows the crew of the other ship trying to signal Titanic.
Oh wow.
Yeah. It's got to be the collision though. That's the selling point. And it's like they
Yeah.
really did their homework on that. Like the iceberg looks like how it's supposed to look like, you know?
I guess mine though is when the guy goes, gentlemen, it's been an honor playing with you, and the other guy start to walk away, and then the guy starts back playing, and then all of them come back and start playing with him.
Yeah. They play a minstrel tune called Clementine,
Yeah.
and most minstrel tunes, it's like the one piece of music that many different hymns can be sung to. The hymn that was in the White Star book for that piece of music was Near My God to Thee. They actually, somebody played Clementine at my friend's father's funeral a couple years back, and I recognized it because I know about the Titanic. But there's
Oh
also
wow.
for many years, like the band of musicians on Titanic were definitely presented as heroes, and they played music and they helped keep people's spirits up. But in more recent times, there is a controversial opinion inside the Titanic community that what they did was kind of wrong. And it was also wrong for the crew to have allowed them to do that. At some point, the
You
crew
mean
should have gone up to the band and been like, "Hey guys, you know this isn't a dinner party. This is an emergency evacuation. Put
uh
your instruments away and get in line for a lifeboat." You know?
I I'm kind of torn on that though. I mean, I would think that I see where you're saying it's an emergency, but I also see where you want to try to keep everybody calm too, because you don't want a
Yeah.
mad, 2,000 people storming for a lifeboat.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, it is a very divisive topic within the Titanic
I mean,
community,
yeah,
and
I can see it going both. Yeah, I mean, I can see both arguments there with it. I mean,
yeah, there's good arguments to be had on both sides. You know,
yeah,
there's
I
no
mean, I can
right answer.
totally see. As somebody who's new to it and not influenced anyway, I can see both sides of that for sure. Um,
Honestly, I don't think that them doing that led to more people dying. You know, like a lot of people were going to die no matter what they did. So, and in the end, they all died. Every single one of them died. But, it's more a matter of they were a part of the ship's crew, the ship's musicians, and their job on the crew was to play music. So they died at their posts doing their job. That
that's
is
a
very, that's commendable. That's very commendable.
Yeah, I mean that is, and then another way I'm looking at it there too is them playing music, like I said, giving them hope. So, you know, it wasn't up until the last minute that I like, well, damn, we're fixing to die. you
Like
know,
it helps add to the mystique of the Titanic, and for that, history should be grateful. The musicians of the Titanic are as much heroes of the story of the sinking as anybody else, and that story could be a hero.
yeah, yeah. See, I didn't. I thought that was so cool. I mean, the way they did it in the movie, and then just that was just the best part to me. Um, of course, the whole scene though, from the time they hit it is just because I can, and I guess anybody can try to put yourself in that situation. Like, oh shit, this ship's fixing to sink. We're all fixing to die. I
Yeah.
can't imagine. And it's the final moments going up there trying to get to the top and hold on to the last minute, and I bet that was just gut wrenching.
Yeah. I mean, there was an event that occurred that we call the wave, wherein as the ship was sinking, suddenly it kind of like lurched forward and down into the water, and a big surge wave went up over the deck. And as far as I know, I believe it was like anybody that lived to tell us about this event was on the one side of the ship, the starboard side. Anybody who was on the port side when that surge wave hit probably got pushed into the ship and drowned.
Yeah, yeah. Um, let's see. I know you probably don't know the number off your head, but the I would imagine there was a very small number of crew that actually survived, though, right?
Yeah, it was a relatively small number. Like out of all the losses, if you count the crew as a group, like you have crew third class, first class, second class, the crew lost the most people out of a total number of that group, the largest
Percentage wise, yeah.
loss, yeah.
Because I would
So
think,
the crew took it harder than anybody else.
yeah, I would think you would just have a few people manning each lifeboat or whatever while everybody else went down.
Well, you had like a handful of guys in each lifeboat to row, and the lifeboats were under command of the various officers. But the second officer, he got swept off of the deck during this surge wave, and it also swept off a boat, a lifeboat, collapsible B, but it swept it off upside down. And when it was in the water, it was too heavy for them to flip it over, so they had to climb up onto this upside down boat and kind of just balance on it so you don't make the air trapping it underneath escape and have it sink out from under you. And that's
huh.
how he spent that night on this upside down boat.
Oh, wow. Oh, God, I bet that was heart wrenching too.
Yep.
Oh, man.
Another controversy in that Titanic story is that some people were turned away from that upside down boat. Like some people were not invited to climb up aboard because they had too many people on it. So when people would swim up, they'd be like, "No, go away! You're going to make the boat sink and kill us all." You know?
Yeah, yeah, because well, that part when the rich dude was pushing them off, I guess that's a play on that.
Yep.
Yeah, I would have. I mean,
Exactly.
sucks, man, but it's, comes down to that. It's every man for himself.
When you post this, send me the link. I'll drop it in some Titanic groups I'm in. If any people in like the Titanic community are ever watching this video, I apologize for not knowing these things. I apologize for not having done better research. I have like a bookshelf full of Titanic books right next to me. I could easily flip them open and find the answers to these questions. But
It's all right.
I've spent a lifetime studying this thing. So for me, it's more about the mystique and stuff rather than the actual details, you know?
Yeah, I know. I understand what you mean on that. I've got a few things of interest like that too that I don't remember the exact numbers on, but still the mystiques with it. Yeah, I'll be sure to get a copy of it. So, is there anything else you want to add to it, Scott? Or
No, I can't really think. I mean, I can talk about the Titanic all day long, so it's more if you have anything else you want to ask me. I'm trying to think if I could come up with anything else.
there's not really anything else I can think of. I mean, I think I've covered all the questions that I had about it.
Okay. Well, glad talking to you, bro. Thank you for having me on. It was good times.
Hey, man, it's good for you talking to you too again, man. And you take care, and I'll send you a link to this, man.
All right. Sounds good, bro.
Uh-huh.